It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hello, Irwin.
You know, Esperanza, I was thinking about this episode, but before even thinking about this episode, I was really thinking about the iconic addresses we all know and love out there. You know, I mean, first one that comes to mind, I guess, for me is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, White House. I guess you could think of 10 Downing Street, England. And of course, you know, stating the incredibly obvious, you know, your home address in Wainscott. But
I was going to say the Taj Mahal. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually looked up the Taj Mahal, but I couldn't really get, they didn't have an address.
An address.
Yeah. The address might have been Taj Mahal.
Taj Mahal.
Rather than
all you need.
An actual number, if you will. But
yeah.
But suffice to say, Esperanza, do you think it's fair to say, in terms of Eastern Long Island, there is no more prominent address than number 1 Main Street, East Hampton?
Well, just to see it written on a page is certainly iconic, given what this area has become. I'm sure in the past it would have been completely insignificant because it's just Main Street.
True. And just,
I mean, as important as a Main Street is, by the way, I'm not diminishing its importance, but yeah, definitely it's become an iconic corner of the area.
And it is, you could call this the heart of East Hampton's Village's business district. I mean, Main Street at Newtown Lane, you know, it doesn't get really much more prominent, you know, than that in terms of everything, you know, its location, the corner, right down to the crosswalk to get there from both Newtown Lane and Main Street.
Yep, it's, you know, definitely
when you're waiting at that light, staring at this building. But so we're going to take a 100+ year look back. And this really was inspired by, honestly, an article from 7 years ago on Camp Curbed. Ethan Firestein wrote it, January of 2016. Not a very long article, Esperanza, really a page, but it really, you know, it sort of got me churning a little bit. And, you know, when we spoke of it before all of this, you even mentioned, you know, all of the personal anecdotes that you can relate to the building. So I think we can really bring that into the audience, to our audience as well.
Yeah. I mean, we're starting in 1917. I'm trying to get a picture of it prior to that, even, you know, as rural as this was. But
exactly. But figuring that 100 years was enough, we didn't go further back than 1917. So we're going to start there. But apparently, well, according actually to this, Esperanza, the Millards, Edwin and Mary, actually built this structure. And according to this, in 1917, it was land owned by a German immigrant, Christian Skank, who, now that's a name that's familiar to anyone in East Hampton because they were Skank Fuels. I think Skank Fuels sold a few years back, but business operated, you know, still in operation under different ownership.
But it's still Skank Fuels, right?
And I think it's still on the other side of Newtown Lane in the back, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're right. Yes.
You know, and you know, the Skanks in the day were pretty industrious. They owned a butcher shop in East Hampton, and then moved into the grain business, the feed business, the coal business. Remember, we're talking 1917. And again, the fuel business.
Yeah.
You know, so that's
crazy. Irwin, just an aside, I'm thinking, wow, this is in my father's lifetime. My father is not with us, but
Right.
it's just incredible to think that, this is like part of my history in a way through him. Yeah.
Yeah, completely true. And I mean, and again, I mean, now I've only been here since 1989, but I remember Skank Fuel. I mean, it's the name completely rings a bell. So the Millards then leased the building to the U.S. government to use as a post office, $900 a year. Love this storyline. I mean, the post office was previously at 41 Main Street, Bookhampton's location. Second floor.
Current location, because
current
it's
location,
had like
correct.
3.
Yeah, good. Right. They've had a few, right? And the second floor, I mean, Esperanza, I realize we're talking 1917, but this incredibly prominent corner, again, we talk about this on Our Hamptons, transport yourself back to a time and place. The New York Telephone Company used the second floor of 1 Main Street for a switchboard space.
I love it. And, I mean, we have to give the picture of, this is, one of those prominent brick buildings.
Right.
Where, on our streetscape of East Hampton, there are quite a few that are just, timber frame shingled buildings.
That's
but
correct.
This is a masonry one. So it makes perfect sense as a post office, or a bank or that kind of thing.
That's
because
right.
they're prominent and solidly built buildings,
Totally true.
Yeah.
And apparently, the American Legion, place near and dear to my heart. This is obviously before my time, but they occupied a portion of the second floor. So you're building the most, again, now defined as the most prominent corner in East Hampton, or possibly the East End, subjective, was a post office, a telephone company switchboard, and an American Legion post.
Mm-hmm.
Circa 1917.
And surely a very prominent building at that time, no doubt.
It had to be.
Mm-hmm.
And look, we've all seen old pictures, the postcard collection, in the East Hampton Library. There's images of this back in the day. I mean, and you make a good point. I mean, we shouldn't minimize it. I mean, the fact that this was a masonry brick building, I mean, it that alone almost made it feel more important.
Sure.
So let's push ahead 10 years, Esperanza. And again, we have to thank Ethan. He packed a lot of juicy information into this. So the building is sold by Mary Millard in 1927 to H.C. Bohack's.
Oh, yeah,
It's a
Bohack's.
supermarket chain.
Yeah.
$68,000 in 1927. By the way, that's not chump change.
I was just going to say, factoring inflation, that was a pretty penny.
Yeah, I mean, $68,000 in a place, 100 miles away from New York City. It's
in 1927.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a pretty valuable piece of real estate. But now Bohack's, now you were living in East Hampton when there was a Bohack's, Esperanza, or no?
Honestly, I don't remember Bohack's. I remember, the name, and maybe it was somewhere there peripherally, but I remember the AMP, and I remember Gristides. Well, the IGA has always been here.
Well, as Our Hampton's audience knows, I'm originally from Queens, and I had a Bohack's walking distance from my house in Queens.
Okay.
So I remember Bohack's very well. Hillside Avenue off Little Neck Parkway. For all of you Queensites out there, I remember it well. So anyway.
So there was, I would add to that. So yes. Given your history with a Bohack's, here was already, the West coming out East.
Excellent point. That's very
1927.
That's right. I mean, now they had Bohack's. We're not a supermarket podcast, but we will give a background. At one point, this was 59 stores. I mean, this was not an insignificant chain, and it was predominantly New York City, but they were also in Westchester, Connecticut, and Long Island. So, yeah. And the fact that, almost 100 years ago, they felt it worthwhile to come out here.
To buy a building.
Yeah. I mean,
says a lot.
Yeah, it certainly does. Now, New York Telephone remained, but the American Legion moved out. The post office moved to Newtown Lane. I love this because it's like history within a history to the building that was at one point the Barefoot Contessa.
Yes. Well, and now that little street has been named after Ina Garten.
That's right. That's right. Uh,
because that's the important history.
Apparently, but that's code. Um, Now the article here says it's currently I don't know if it's still theory now, but
oh gosh, I can't remember.
I can't. I honestly I can't.
It's another rag store. I can't.
I can't keep
expensive rags.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit further. Now we're going to go to 1949, and Bohacs, after 22 years, moved basically across the street to 2 Pantago Road. To expand their store, make it, according to Ethan's article, easier for the increasing number of customers now driving. And this building is currently Citarella.
Right. And I remember it as Brooks Pharmacy.
Oh. Wow. Wow. Brooke. So you remember Citarella as Brooks Pharmacy. Now,
and there was a deli there too.
There was a deli.
Yep.
Now, because I remember there was a deli before
I think Windmill Deli. It was called
the Windmill Deli. You're exactly, and that was there for a long. That was there for a long time. Esperanza.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow. The Windmill Deli.
See, I can add to this history.
We're counting on you to add.
I'm really retrieving from the hard drive, but yes,
we're counting on you. And from the files of what could have been, Bohacs moving there scuttled previous plans for a gas station on that site. Now, that would have, so you would have had a gas station. You would have had a gas station.
Catty corner to number 1 Main Street.
I'm imagining this. A gas station. I guess you could have egress out on Fithian Lane there. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Back when you could cross that street, by the way, between.
Exactly.
Anyway, it's.
Yeah,
people do it all the time now, crossing from Citarella over to the other side, which is now Prada. But it's throwing your life in your hands,
completely
someone else's hands, really.
Yeah, anyone crossing, please go to the crosswalk because you'll never get across otherwise. Admittedly, I've tried to run across at times and almost regretted it once or twice. So now we're going to go a little further, right? So we're sort of morphing. Now we're at 1950, and I'm going to hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, when the Trudy, either Trude or Trudy, Trude, shop opens in the form.
Hold on, because it's the Trude or Trudy, but it's the Shoppy too. SHOPPE.
That's true. And here we go, Esperanza. These people had some foresight because they started selling dresses and sportswear.
Oh my gosh, 1950, and there were already the fancy rags. Yes.
And now it was owned by a Donald and Gertrude Katz of Sag Harbor, and selling fashions, get the load of this. I mean, inspired by their honeymoon in Paris. And Gertrude is the daughter of the Rosensteins, who owned the Philnet shop, or as Esperanza would say, shoppy. Another dress shop at 96 Main Street, Sag Harbor. Brown Harris Stevens currently, according to Ethan. And the Katzes eventually opened a Trudy location in Sag Harbor as well. So I guess now we have the Trudy shop, the phone company still being there in 1950. But at this point,
I love this part.
Oh, well, God,
I would. I would.
And you took the words right out of my mouth
because I recognized this name immediately.
I was going to say the exact same thing to you. So Esperanza, why don't you tell our audience, since you love it so much, who bought 1 Main Street in 1950?
The
Esperanza.
next owner of number 1 Main Street, East Hampton, is Gilbert P. Smith of East Hampton. He was the co-founder of the Smith Meal Company at Promised Land, which is near Lazy Point, near Amagansett.
Right.
And, I think, have we done an episode on this? I can't even think of it.
I mean,
yet.
it's been
Have we
touched
done
on.
it yet?
I don't believe we've done an
We
actual
need to do this.
full-blown, but boy,
It's
it's
there's
so
a lot
worthy of it,
there.
Esperanza.
Promised Land brought, oh my gosh, so many people together. This area of Promised Land once had its own zip code, by the way. So I was in Napeague. So if everybody can picture Napeague, this was the fish factory basically is there today. So this company was one of the largest menhaden or bunker fishing
Right.
and processing companies in the world. And it operated 15 ports and processing facilities along the East Coast, which is really
this
incredible.
was not just some little local business. I mean, this was a major operation.
Correct. Yeah.
And
well, as they say that, and just I have to say this, they would say that it was, it's a fishy smell that wafted from Promised Land, and in Amagansett they would say it smells like money.
That's right. That's exactly right. And again, just imagine. And we really should do an episode on Promised Land because it's such a worthy topic. And it's really just imagine present day Amagansett underneath the cloud, wafting in the smell of
oily fish.
I probably wouldn't fly today, but just gives you an idea of what this place was like. Again, not 300 years ago, Esperanza.
No, and now we're approaching, and now we're getting out of the 50s and we're getting into my lifetime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When when a man that I knew, Dr. Alan York,
right,
and an attorney, Joseph Fallon, buy the building.
That's right. Now again, 1971. So interesting, Esperanza, when you think about it, in 27, the building sold for $68,000. So 44 years later, it went for $85,000.
Yeah, which I think and I may be totally wrong because I am not the most mathematically inclined, but recently I had to do something and it was saying, what this was worth in the 70s is, today would be worth X amount.
Right.
This was $500,000 roughly.
Okay. Fair enough.
The equivalent.
Fair enough. But interestingly, like in terms of whatever you want, and again, we're not an economics podcast.
No, but it's still, think of it, $500,000. It's still for then a lot of money, but not a lot really in today's.
No. And not an enormous increase from in 44 years.
Yeah, exactly.
A little over whatever, 20%, 20%, well, 22% maybe. But so anyway, Dr. York, Esperanza's optometrist.
Yes, ophthalmologist.
Right. And, responsible, took care of Esperanza's eyes.
My eyeballs.
And probably her family as well.
Yes.
With the attorney, Joseph Fallon. So he did have a partner. They divided the ground floor in two. So Dr. York, who was at 35 Main Street prior, so that's a few doors down to the to the west. And Joe Fallon occupied half of these offices upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Esperanza, you're not the only famous patient of Dr. Alan York. Apparently, de Kooning was also. So he at least had two famous patients, both Esperanza and de Kooning. And so that was the story. And he, as an aside, I didn't know this, but this would probably be fascinating. Dr. York, were you aware of his collection of political paraphernalia? Did he have that in the office? Do you
You know,
know?
I was going to say my recollection was that he was a collector, and I didn't, I didn't recall it being political paraphernalia, but it makes, perfect sense. If I may have even seen the exhibition at Guildhall, for all I know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, which is an interesting
Back,
little tidbit.
back when Guildhall did that kind of
Yeah.
exhibition,
Yeah. That would be a fascinating, like I've seen
right?
those kind of exhibitions, all political, banners and bumper stickers,
Mm-hmm.
buttons.
Mm-hmm.
It is really, it's super interesting kind of thing to see. So now that's 1971. So moving it a little bit forward. And now, as we're getting closer to present day, still not there yet, the names are going to start to resonate and ring a bell. I mean, Dick and Wendy Engel Pottery. I remember Engel Pottery.
Yeah.
Joined the building at 1 Main Street, selling pottery, crafts, baskets.
Yeah, it was a beautiful store.
Yeah, yeah, and they were originally in Bridgehampton, and then at Newtown. They moved to Newtown Lane before moving here. But apparently, Dr. York and Mr. Fallon. 9 years later, now we're getting really into more present day. 89. This is when I first came out here. So the rent was increased. I'm telling you, this is expensive rent.
It's extraordinary. I can't even imagine in 1989 paying $5,500 a month, which is $55 per square foot. And it apparently set a record, right?
Yeah.
For,
I mean, that's serious money for in 1989, which was still far more than today.
Yeah.
It was much more seasonal than it is today.
Yeah. Wow.
So and that rent was expensive enough to make the Engels move to 51 Main Street.
Yep. And I remember that. Yep.
Okay. And again, now we'll go into a little history lesson, a little
Marley's.
then and now.
Mm.
Now we know it is the Corcoran real estate offices, but then Esperanza, I'm sure you remember this store.
I remember Marley's. Yeah.
I mean, and Marley's was there for 83 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess they bought the building from James Marley. I have to believe he owned the building. Can't be sure, but it was $510,000. Esperanza, as an aside, the Marley Lane off of Skimhampton Road, do you think there's a correlation to the Marley?
No idea.
No idea. Okay,
but
just
be. Yeah.
Just a thought. So now we're in 89. So we're 34 years ago. Wendy Engel bought the building. I'm going to go on record with not even knowing this. The best $510,000 they ever spent. Especially if they still have it. And now here are two names I certainly remember well. The photographer Tom Steele and his wife, the artist Ellen Dooley.
Yeah.
I own pieces from both of these. From both of them, actually. And I remember this store vividly, still in East Hampton, above the potatoes at 1 Main Street.
Yeah. I mean, it was the best.
Now, Esperanza, this was like, so not late 80s. So we don't talk ages on East Hampton, but this was a young Esperanza.
My teen years.
It's okay. She's going to volunteer that. This was her teen years. Okay. Her teen years. So now Tom and Ellen had locations also in Southampton and West Hampton, which they closed when they got this iconic spot, apparently. So Esperanza, you were a customer of Tom and Ellen's, I from what you've told me, right?
Yeah,
Actually.
Oh, for sure. I still have some items from that store. I'm pretty sure hanging in my closet. Yep.
That is right. Now again, this store still exists down on Newtown Lane. I mean, it's still there. I don't think they own it any longer, but Tom Steele described it as a lifestyle store for the entire family. It was very quirky. Now, this I didn't realize. I didn't even realize it until I just looked at it now. Do you remember this, Esperanza? They had live models in the windows displaying their wares.
I do not remember live models. I remember the quirky, store front window dressings. You know, I
Okay.
think they were really appealing and, you know,
Right.
funky and eccentric. And inside were all these vintage,
Right.
just all kinds of things like, you know, farm equipment. I don't even remember, you know,
Yeah.
like old Coca-Cola machine kind of thing, a photo booth.
It's exactly what
Thinking,
he's
yeah,
saying. He went, Tom was saying how in the off season they would go and buy, to your point, vintage Americana,
yeah,
window
they're very
displays,
artistic, and so they
Coke
had a,
machines,
yeah,
gas pumps, signs. Like that's the kind of stuff
exactly,
I love, by the way.
yeah, yeah,
You know, and this is
yeah,
very
and that combined with sort of this also rustic vintage looking interior, you know, of wood floorboards and things like that, it made for a really, it was very experiential.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and
And
really
not
some
cheap, by the way.
yeah. Considering at the end of the day, a lot of it was, you know, their current business model is really t-shirts at this point. You know, I think when Tom and Ellen had it, it was a little bit different. I mean, today it's really a t-shirt, sweatshirt kind of store. But you
Where
know,
is the store that you're talking about? I'm
is
sorry.
this is am I still am I
Are you
wrong that
like,
we,
I'm sorry, like where did I
you know, something? Am I having a brain fog? Is there what is what is that? I could be wrong. You know, thank you for correcting me because you know I think you're right. Above
I I
above the
don't,
potatoes came and went and didn't reappear anywhere else.
no,
What
no,
is that
no.
store down the road on Newtown Lane that I'm confusing with above the potatoes?
I
I
can't think
remember
of a
above the
single
potatoes vividly.
store on Newtown Lane that has any interest even close to what Above the Potatoes is.
Why am I painting this other store I'm thinking of with the above the potatoes brush? All right, Esperanza. We don't do much editing on East Hampton. I'm not going to edit this either. I'm going to allow
No, this is a
Esperanza.
conversation.
I'm going to allow Esperanza and with gratitude, thank you so much for correcting me. But the
No, I
long,
thought I was missing something.
no, no, okay, no. I'm thinking I'll think of it probably, you know, a week from now. It's going to bounce into my mind. But okay, but we gave I think our audience gets the vibe of what Tom and Ellen created here. Love some of these quotes. An old time retailer stopping in and telling them, "You do all the wrong things in just the right way."
There you go. I love
You
it.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know, again, you don't want to talk. They did things like the store stayed open on weekends, off until past midnight.
Well, you know, that's something that I can tell you was what was so great about what East Hampton in particular, and I think most of the villages used to be like, is that, I mean, I remember back when on Main Street there was a place called Penny Lane. I don't know if you remember
Yep,
Penny Lane.
sure.
I mean, those stores would stay open until 11 midnight. I
Right,
I mean, I had that experience of
right,
working until 10 or 11 at night because people
right.
would be dining and walking around and they would stroll into the stores and
Yeah, and it's funny.
everything now, the carpets are rolled up,
I,
you know.
I used to always say that to Rachel, my wife, like when if we'd be walking around, and I would say, you know, why on a July Saturday night aren't these stores open till whenever? You know,
Because they
there's a
don't sell
February.
anything interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm even going back to even
Oh,
back in
back,
the yeah.
yeah.
I sort of wondered the same thing as you, but
Oh, back in the 80s? Oh, the place was hopping.
yeah,
80s, 90s, early 90s.
yeah,
East Hampton was
yeah. You know,
hot at
and
night.
and and it was hopping with the really retailers because despite the fact that it didn't have necessarily have you know a lot of as wet usage here. It was just like a lot of the retailers, you know, were open. So
Well, yeah, you had the movie theater. You know, people
yeah,
would go to the movies, the movie would let out, they'd go
and you
to
would
O'Malley's or whatever,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
they'd come out, they'd go to, you know, they'd shop around from the
yeah,
Palm, whatever else. It was just another vibe, which has completely, you know, it's a
yeah,
sad, sad place now. Sorry,
yeah.
I
Yeah,
didn't mean to
okay. Well,
come down
that's
on that,
you
but
know,
we miss you,
sometimes
Tom and Ellen.
yeah,
They're still
they
around, but
exactly.
we miss Above the Potatoes.
They are around. I mean, they opened up a store a few years later. I don't recall this one called Home on the Range, which ultimately became Ann Cobe Gallery. And
Mm.
then as you know, you mentioned that Jonathan Adler, the ceramic designer, and at this time there was an attorney, Roy Greenberg, upstairs, and Fred Stelly, the architect. So that was the building then. But now we're going into the 21st century, Esperanza. The year 2000, above the potatoes, Dr. York asking them for $15K a month, an incredibly high rent in the year
Yeah.
2000.
Well, just to give you a little context quickly, I mean, that's when I moved back to East Hampton after being away for a few years.
Okay.
And 2000, 2001. Anne Kolb moved out of Dr. York's building, probably for the same reason, because her rent was so increased and she had a very small space. So she moved across the street on the side of the movie theater. And that was my first job when I first came back to live here. So I worked with Anne. And I remember all of these changes, but I remember knowing that I think Anne at the time for her new space, which was much larger,
right,
was paying $5,500.
Yeah, I mean, that was,
and I thought it was cuckoo.
Just, so Calypso, we're in 2000 now. Above the Potatoes leaves. Calypso, I remember Calypso. I'm sure you do as well. Only they just recently doubled the size of their store at 17 Newtown. They took over the ground floor at 1 Main. Mm-hmm. And by 2005, Calypso had 3 stores in East Hampton Village.
Because, of course, you need, 3 stores in the same town.
Apparently.
And same parts.
Now, here we go. 2006. Now we're getting more into Hamptonization, quote unquote. As the building in 2006, Dr. York, who passed away a few years later, sold the building to Eli Tahari, $7.5 million. Good return on investment for Dr. York, but that's he didn't rob a bank. That store opened in 2007, pardon me. But now we really have to go to present day, and this is where we're going to begin to wrap up Esperanza. Now, Eli Tahari was there for an awfully long time, obviously. He had the store. It was his own space, and then he, I think, rented it. Cartier had it for a period of time. Am I correct?
Just in the recent,
in the very recent history. But
3 years, yeah.
Now, Esperanza, metaphorically, and boy, this is the metaphor for the ages. And this is April of 2023, so we're really in present day. 1 Main Street was sold to Bernard Arnault. $22 million. At the time, might have been for a nanosecond, might have been for a longer period of time. Bernard Arnault was the richest person in the world. And the richest person in the world saw value in 1 Main Street, East Hampton. And now Bernard Arnault is LVMH. Am I correct, Esperanza? That's,
yes.
Amongst other things. Okay. 5,000 square foot, split between 2 levels. Each square foot cost Mr. Arnault $4,400. Now, remember the rent roll, $55 these people couldn't afford. He paid $4,400 a foot, a record for any commercial real estate transaction in the Hamptons ever, said Jeremy Tahari, obviously Eli's son.
He was jubilant, clearly.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Cushman and Wakefield, the high price of 1 Main Street indicative of a combination of both location and tenancy. That tenant at the time being Cartier.
Yes.
Okay. And, Jeremy Tahari goes on. I mean, Eli Tahari did a magnificent renovation on that building. I mean, he really transformed that into a beautiful space. Okay. On the interior.
I'm going to
okay, she's going to
let that one go.
But let's just say he made a dramatic change to the interior of the building, which might appeal as retail space. I'll rephrase it that way.
Yeah, they changed all the fenestration. They altered the building.
They altered the interior, not the exterior as much. I mean, that's
the windows, the entrances. Yes, okay. The fenestration changed. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But and just to give you a background, LVMH is Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, Tiffany, blah, blah, blah. By the way, apparently he edged out Elon Musk when he became known as the richest person in the world.
Right.
And apparently,
for the split second.
And apparently the building, his net worth was $211 billion at one point. So this building represented 1/10,000th of his net worth. Anyway, we're getting a little on the somber side now, but
that's what happens when you just talk money.
Yeah, exactly.
It loses a little bit of that poetry. I like the history here much more.
It's true, but it's part of the story, Esperanza. It's got to be said.
I mean, I'm going back to Bohax buying this back in.
But Bohax, how about the switchboard for New York Telephone?
Yeah, no, but I mean, buying it, that was, they saw the value. I mean, forget Arnaud, they saw value in this small town, which at the time was a nothing place. It was a fishing village, right? I mean, farming fishing village.
That's correct. And we should also mention, I forgot to bring this up, and I know we have to wrap up, but Tom Steele actually had a photo booth in his store.
I mentioned, yeah.
Oh, you did? And the fishermen used to go in there to get their license photos.
Oh, is that a passport?
Yeah,
or not
we should have touched on that. But to wrap this up, Hal Zwick, who we actually had on a podcast, a couple of months previously, commercial real estate broker out here. This is an anomaly, the price. It's obviously the premier building out here. And Eli Tahari purchased it in 2007 and did, which Esperanza disagrees with, a phenomenal renovation. It's a corner, great visibility. It's almost the perfect building. So anyway, that's sort of where we are, Esperanza.
Yeah, we are in the evolution of a small town Main Street that has become essentially, I mean, the only parallel, it's like an outdoor mall, high-end mall, akin to Rodeo Drive.
Something we've touched on. It could be anywhere. It could be Tokyo or Dubai at this point.
Well, yeah, and it's just a symptom of a resort community, really, right. That it's, I don't know why anyone visiting from any other place, especially from New York City, would want to find the same stores that they can shop in on Madison Avenue here. But
I agree. But what makes it interesting when, we really need to wrap this up, but in context, over 100+ year retrospective that we just did, I mean, one Main Street's the metaphor for Eastern Long Island. One Main Street is Bohax, a telephone switchboard, an American Legion, even closer to present day, an attorney's office, and now
Louis Vuitton.
From a telephone switchboard to a Bohax supermarket to a mom and pop eclectic store to Louis Vuitton and the richest person in the world. Sigh, or if you prefer,
I'm going to sob.
Okay. Esperanza and I are on Zoom. I'm trying to hand a tissue to her. But wow.
Again, not trying to freeze time.
No, Paul Goldberg. We're not.
To, keep that essence of a place, which is, impossible now. So I'm not going to leave you on a sad note.
No. And Esperanza, even though, in all candor to our audience, it's 10 a.m., I need to sign off now and have a drink.
Yeah. Thanks, Irwin.
Thank you, Esperanza.
For this history.
That was fun.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.